You hired more people to fix chaos. It got worse. Let me guess, you thought adding headcount would finally give you the breathing room? Instead, you got more meetings, more miscommunications, and more rework. The problems didn't shrink, they multiplied. Here's the thing, this isn't about working harder, and it's not about hiring better people. It's about the structural trap most leaders fall into, believing headcount solves operational dysfunction. Growth doesn't fix fragility, it amplifies it. And if you don't see the gap in your competency structure before you scale, you're about to learn an expensive lesson the hard way. By the end of this video, you'll understand why adding more people often multiplies your problems, how to diagnose structural weaknesses before it becomes a crisis, and the exact framework that protects your organization from collapse under its own growth. If you're a founder or senior leader who scaled revenue but increased stress, if delays and rework are now your normal operating mode, if your best people are covering for a fragile system and everything still depends on you, this is a pattern you need to break, because the next hire won't fix it. The next quarter won't fix it. Structure fixes it. I've coached dozens of founders through this exact trap. They come to me exhausted, convinced they need better people. What they actually need is the competency mapping and execution discipline. The ones who get that right stop firefighting and start leading. The ones who don't, they burn out and bring in someone else to run their company. So let's break down why this happens and what actually works. Point number one, why hiring more people makes your problem worse. Leaders believe hiring more people will fix operational chaos. It rarely does. Here's what actually happens. When you scale a fragile structure, you don't stabilize it, you make the fragility visible. Every weak process, every unclear handoff, every dependency on one person gets multiplied across more people and more complexity. The chaos you're experiencing isn't a people problem, it's a structure problem. And structure doesn't scale by accident. Think about it like this. Imagine building a second floor on a house with a cracked foundation. The weight doesn't fix the crack, it makes them catastrophic. The structure couldn't hold what it already had, adding more just accelerates the collapse. That's what's happening when you hire into dysfunction. You're not solving the problem, you're scaling it. If you're experiencing more rework after hiring, if delays are increasing, not decreasing, if inconsistency is the norm and everyone gives you a different answer to the same question, you're not hiring the wrong people. You're scaling without structural clarity. And no amount of talent or effort fixes that. You need architecture first, then you scale. Point number two, how competent people hide the gap that will eventually break you. Right now, your best people are compensating for missing systems, unclear roles, and shallow competency coverage. They're making it work, but they're also masking the risk. When they're out sick or on vacation or they leave, you discover how fragile the structure really was. But by then, you're in crisis mode, scrambling to keep the lights on. This is why leadership maturity isn't measured by how well you handle fires. It's measured by how proactively you address structural risk before it becomes a crisis. I worked with a client who came to me after losing their VP of operations. Everything fell apart within 2 weeks. Not because the VP was incredible as a human being, but because no one else had been developed to carry the competency. The entire operational system was hiding behind one person's experience and instincts. The org chart said they had redundancy. The reality was they had a single point of failure wrapped in a job title. If you feel indispensable, if your team escalates everything to you, if decision-making stalls when you're unavailable, that's not loyalty, that's structural dependency. And it's a ticking clock. Your best people aren't covering for incompetence. They're covering for gaps in your competency structure, and until you build the depth, you're one departure away from chaos. Point number three, the diagnostics tool that shows you what's actually breaking. The Core Competency Matrix is a structural diagnostic. It maps every critical function in your organization against the people who can perform it, not at a basic level, but at a full operational competency. Here's what it reveals. Where you have single points of failure, where competency is shallow, where growth will create bottlenecks or breakdowns before they happen. This isn't theoretical. This is, can this person execute this function without supervision consistently under pressure? The standard, 3 deep competency coverage. For every critical function in your organization, you need 3 people who can execute it at full competency. Not kind of familiar, not could figure it out if you gave them a week, full operational execution. Why 3? 1 person can be on vacation, 2 can handle normal load. 3 people protect you against disruption, transition, and scale. If you can't map 3 names to a critical function, you don't have a system, you have a dependency. And dependencies don't scale, they break. This isn't about redundancy for redundancy's sake. It's about building an organization that can function and grow without you being the structural glue that holds everything together. At the end of the day, if your company can't run without you for 2 weeks, without things falling apart, you don't have a business, you have a high-stress job you can't quit. The Core Competency Matrix forces you to confront that, and then gives you a roadmap to fix it. I always say it's the map for cloning you out of the business. Point number 4, why most leaders confuse activity with progress. Execution is the multiplier. Growth without execution discipline makes things worse. You can have the best strategy, the best people, the best intentions, but if execution is inconsistent, reactive, or dependent on heroics, you're building a house of cards. Execution discipline means clear accountability, predictable rhythms, systems that hold under pressure, and decisions that don't require you. Most leaders try to solve execution problems with motivation. They give the pep talk, they push harder, they ask for more effort. Motivation is a sugar high. It feels good in the moment, but it wears off, and then you're right back to where you started, just more exhausted. Discipline is in the architecture. Discipline doesn't depend on how you feel. It's the system that holds when things get hard. Here's the truth. If your team is constantly firefighting, if the same problems keep resurfacing, if you're repeating the same conversations every quarter, that's not a performance issue, that's a system issue. And systems don't fix themselves through effort. They fix through design. Stop hiring your way out of chaos. Stop hoping the next quarter will be different because everyone's really committed this time. Build the structure first, then scale it. Because without execution discipline, growth just gives you more chaos to manage. And I promise you, that's not the business you signed up to build. Look, if you're realizing right now that your organization is more fragile than you thought, that your best people are covering for structural gaps, that you're one departure away from chaos, you're not alone and you're not broken. You just need a different framework. I work with founders and senior leaders who are ready to move from heroic leadership to sustainable stewardship. If that's you, let's talk. Links in the description. Point number 5, the difference between reactive leadership and structural stewardship. Leadership maturity isn't about how heroic you solve problems. It's about how proactively you eliminate the conditions that create them. Reactive leaders put out fires. Mature leaders build systems that don't catch fire. This requires a fundamental shift in identity from the person who has all the answers to the person who builds a team that doesn't need me to function. The Core Competency Matrix forces the shift. It makes you confront structural risk before it becomes a crisis. It makes you develop people, not just rely on them. And here's the hardest part. It requires you to let go of being indispensable. Because if you're indispensable, your organization is fragile, and fragile doesn't scale. Sustainable success is engineered, not luck. You don't wing it to the next level. You build it with systems, culture, and disciplined execution. That's the difference between a business that survives and one that scales. And that engineering starts with structural clarity, with knowing where you're vulnerable, with building competency depth before you need it, not after it's already cost you. That's leadership maturity. That's what gets you to the next level. Here's what we've covered. Growth amplifies weaknesses. It doesn't fix them. Your best people are masking structural risk. The Core Competency Matrix reveals gaps before crisis. Execution discipline is the real multiplier, and leadership maturity is measured by proactive risk management, not reactive heroics. This isn't just about scaling, it's about building an organization that can function, grow, and thrive without depending on you. That's the shift. But here's the next question. How do you actually build that competency depth? How do you develop people without doubling your workload or turning into a micromanager? That's what I'm covering in an upcoming video on the people process. Now that you understand why scaling often makes things worse, you need to know how to develop leadership capacity in your team without burning yourself out in the process.